mansion smelled like dust and dead flowers, and Marissa Bennett stood in the foyer with her flashlight cutting through the dark like a blade. Water damage bloomed across the ceiling in the shape of a continent no one had ever named. She had signed a contract 3 days ago to restore this house from the studs up. She had not been told the man who owned it would be standing behind her in the doorway, silent, until she turned around and nearly dropped the light. "You're smaller than I expected," Vincent Moretti said. "You're ruder than I expected," Marissa answered, and something in his face shifted, not quite a smile, more like the memory of one. She had taken this job because the pay was absurd and her contracting business needed the cash injection badly enough that she had not asked enough questions. But standing in this house, feeling the weight of his stare on the back of her neck, she understood that the money had a price tag nobody had mentioned in the paperwork. Vincent Moretti owned half of the waterfront properties in this stretch of New Jersey, and, according to the quiet talk that moved through contractor circles like smoke, considerably more than legitimate real estate. He was somewhere in his late 30s, dark-haired, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him the way expensive things fit men who never had to think about money. A scar ran along his jaw, thin and old, the kind of mark that had a story nobody offered to tell. A gold watch sat heavy on his wrist, worn but cared for, the kind of object that had clearly belonged to somebody before it belonged to him. "The house has been empty for 6 years," he said. "I want it done in 4 months." "That's an aggressive timeline for a house this far gone." "I don't do timelines that aren't aggressive." She looked around at the water stains, the collapsed section of the east wing, the chandelier hanging by exactly one working chain, and felt her professional brain start doing math before her personal brain could catch up to the fact that this man made people disappear for a living, allegedly, according to whispers she had chosen to ignore because the check cleared. "Why this house?" she asked. "You have 3 penthouses from what I hear." "I don't need a penthouse. I need a home." He said the word home like it cost him something to say it, like the syllables scraped against a wound he did not examine in front of strangers. "You have 4 months and whatever budget it takes. I want it to feel lived in, not staged, lived in." Marissa filed that answer away, the way she filed away every strange detail in her work, because strange details usually meant something underneath them worth understanding. She had built her business on noticing the things clients did not say out loud. A cracked foundation was rarely just a cracked foundation. It was usually a story about what had been ignored for years until it could not be ignored any longer. She suspected this house and this man were no different. She walked the ground floor slowly that first afternoon, running her hand along the water-damaged plaster, testing floorboards with the toe of her boot, cataloging problems in the small notebook she carried everywhere because her phone had died on a job site once and cost her a client. Vincent trailed a few steps behind her the entire time, not offering opinions, not rushing her, simply watching the way she moved through his ruined house like she already understood it better than he did. "You don't talk much for someone who wants a 4-month miracle," she said without turning around. "I talk when there's something worth saying." "That must make dinner parties exhausting." "I don't go to dinner parties." A pause. "Not the kind you're imagining anyway." She let that sit. She had learned early in her career that silence was often more productive than a follow-up question, especially with clients who measured their words the way this one did. She started the next morning with a crew of 6, stripping wallpaper in rooms that had not seen daylight through clean windows in years. Vincent appeared at odd hours, never announced, standing in doorways with his hands in his pockets, watching her work like he was trying to solve an equation. He rarely spoke. When he did, his questions were specific and strange. Why did you choose oak for the banister instead of the mahogany that was there before? Because oak takes damage better, and this house is going to see a lot of hands on that railing eventually, if you actually want it lived in. He studied her for a long moment, the kind of look that made her want to check that her collar was straight, and then he nodded once and left the room. She realized later that had been the first time she had seen him show interest instead of simple ownership. Her crew talked about him in low voices when he was not around, the way people talk about weather systems, something powerful and slightly dangerous that you plan your day around without asking too many questions. One of her guys, a wiry electrician named Polly who had worked jobs in this part of Jersey for 20 years, pulled her aside during a break in the second week. "You know who that is, right?" Polly asked, jerking his chin toward the window where Vincent's car sat parked on the gravel drive. "I know he's the client." "He's Moretti, as in the Moretti family. You want to keep your head down on this one, Marissa. Do the work, take the check. Don't ask about the room at the end of the hall." "What room at the end of the hall?" Polly had not answered that, just shaken his head and gone back to running conduit, and Marissa had spent the rest of that day thinking about locked doors and the particular way some men avoided looking at certain hallways in their own homes. 3 weeks into the job, she found the locked room at the end of the east hallway. The contract said full access, but the door was reinforced steel behind old oak paneling, disguised to look like storage. She mentioned it at their weekly check-in, expecting an explanation. Instead, his face closed like a door slamming. "Leave that room alone," he said. "Work around it." "I can't fix a house and leave a hole in it." "You can, and you will." She should have let it drop. She was smart enough to know that. But something about the tightness in his jaw when he said it made her certain the answer mattered more than the wallpaper. And Marissa Bennett had never been good at leaving a question unanswered once it had lodged itself under her skin. That night, working late on the lighting plans in the dining room, she heard raised voices from the study down the hall. Vincent's voice low and controlled, another man's voice higher and frightened. She was not supposed to hear it. She stood very still in the dark, listening to fragments. Territory. A shipment. A name she did not recognize. Dominic. Spoken with a fury that made the hair on her arms rise. When the study door opened minutes later, a man she had never seen left through the side entrance, moving fast, not looking at anyone, and Vincent stood in the hallway afterward with his hands loose at his sides, breathing like he had just put something dangerous back in a box. He saw her standing there. Neither of them said anything about it, but something passed between them in that silence, an acknowledgement that she had seen a piece of him not meant for her, and instead of anger, his eyes held something closer to exhaustion. "Go home, Marissa," he said quietly. "It's late." "I was going to." "Go home anyway." She left that night with her pulse still too fast, and she told herself it was the raised voices, not the way he had said her name, low and careful, like it was something he did not want to break. She did not sleep well that night. She lay awake replaying the sound of the other man's voice, the fear threaded through it, and Vincent's response, flat and final, the kind of calm that only existed on the other side of absolute control. She told herself this was none of her business. She told herself the same thing 3 more times before she finally fell asleep, and she was not entirely sure she believed it any of those times. The weeks that followed built a rhythm between them that neither acknowledged out loud. He started arriving earlier, staying later, asking questions that had nothing to do with the renovation, what she had studied, why she chose construction instead of architecture, which paid better and asked less of a person's body. She found herself answering honestly, more honestly than she planned, because something about the stillness of him made silence feel like the wrong choice. "My father was a contractor," she told him one evening, sanding a window frame in the library while he stood by the empty shelves with a glass of wine he had not touched. "He built things. I liked watching things become something they weren't before, broken things especially." "Is that why you took this job? Because the house was broken?" "I took this job because you were paying triple market rate for a 4-month timeline nobody sane would agree to." She glanced at him. "But yeah, maybe also because of that." He almost smiled again. It kept happening now, this almost, like his face had forgotten the muscle memory required to finish the expression. "What about you?" she asked, testing the edge of the frame with her thumb. "What did you want to be before all this?" "Before all what?" "Before whatever it is Polly warned me not to ask about." Something flickered behind his eyes, amusement or warning, she could not tell which. "I wanted to build things too, actually. Bridges. I studied engineering for 2 years before my father died, and the family needed someone at the top of it who understood numbers as well as he understood loyalty." He said it simply, without self-pity, like a fact he had made peace with a long time ago. "I still think in structures, load-bearing walls, points of failure. I just apply it to different kinds of buildings now." "That's a strange way to describe running an empire." "It's not an empire. It's a family. There's a difference, even if the outside doesn't see it." She wanted to ask what the difference was. She did not yet, sensing that some doors opened only when a person was ready to walk through them on their own timeline, not hers. The locked room stayed locked, but one evening in early spring, working alone after her crew had left, she found him standing in front of it, the door cracked open, a single lamp burning inside. She should have walked past. She did not. "You can come in," he said without turning around, "since you're already standing there." Inside was a bedroom, small, preserved exactly, a woman's belongings arranged with a precision that spoke of grief rather than housekeeping. A hairbrush on the dresser, a cardigan over a chair. Everything dusted, nothing moved. "My sister," Vincent said. "Angela. She lived here before I did, before everything that happened." "What happened to her?" "She trusted the wrong man in my organization. He was supposed to protect her when things got dangerous. Instead, he sold her location to people who wanted to hurt our family through her." His voice stayed level, but his hands were not still anymore. They moved slightly at his sides like he needed somewhere to put the feeling and had nowhere left. "I got there 4 minutes too late. I have replayed those 4 minutes every day for 6 years. "Vincent, I'm so sorry." "I bought this house because she loved it. I have not been able to walk past this door without wanting to burn the whole building down, and I have not been able to let anyone touch it either." He turned to look at her then, fully, the way he had never let himself look at her before. "Until you." "Why me?" "Because you don't flinch. Everyone else in my life flinches. You argue with me about banisters." She laughed despite herself, a short, surprised sound, and something in the room loosened, like a held breath finally released. "I'm not going to touch this room until you tell me to," she said. "But I think you should let me. Not to erase her, to let this house breathe again. I think she'd want that more than she'd want a shrine." "You didn't know her." "No, but I know what it's like to love a space so much you're afraid of what happens if you change it. My father's workshop sat untouched for 2 years after he passed. I finally cleared it out last spring. It didn't feel like losing him again. It felt like finally letting him rest." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, looking at the cardigan on the chair, like he was seeing it for the first time in years instead of the 100th. "I don't know how to do that. Let things rest." "You don't have to know how yet. You just have to decide you want to learn. He did not answer that night, but 2 days later, he handed her a key. She began work on Angela's room the following week, carefully, respectfully, boxing the clothing to be donated rather than discarded, at Vincent's quiet insistence, keeping only the hairbrush and a single photograph she found tucked behind the dresser mirror. A young woman laughing at something outside the frame, dark-haired like her brother, with the same watchful eyes. She had the photograph reframed and left it on the newly refinished mantel without asking permission, and when Vincent saw it 3 days later, he stood in front of it for a long time before saying anything at all. "She would have liked you," he said finally. "She never liked anyone I brought around. She said most people were afraid of what I was, and it made them boring. You're not boring." "Is that your version of a compliment?" "It's the only version I have." The danger arrived not from within the house, but from the shipment argument she had overheard weeks earlier. A rival faction, run by a man named Carmine Russo, had been circling Vincent's territory for months, and Marissa learned exactly how close that circling had come to striking when a black car idled outside the property gates 3 evenings in a row. Engine running, no one getting out, just watching. "They know about this place," Vincent told her, standing in the foyer with a tension in his shoulders she had not seen since the day they met. "They know I care about it. That makes it a target. Then let me help secure it properly. Structural reinforcements, better sight lines, exits that actually function. I'm already redesigning half this house. I can redesign it defensible too." "This isn't your fight, Marissa. You made it my fight when you hired me to make this place livable. A house isn't livable if the person living in it can't feel safe in it." He studied her for a long moment, something working behind his eyes that looked almost like surrender. "You're supposed to run from men like me." I did the math. Running seemed like a worse investment than staying and doing the job right. That earned her something rare, a real laugh, short and low, gone almost as fast as it arrived. But she had heard it, and she carried the sound of it home with her that night, like a secret she had not decided what to do with yet. Over the following weeks, she reworked the security of the house without making it feel like a fortress, a skill she had not known she possessed until she needed it. Reinforced doors disguised as decorative iron, sightlines cleared through careful landscaping rather than obvious surveillance. A delay lock built into the side entrance that looked, to any casual observer, like nothing more than an old-fashioned latch. Vincent watched her work with something like wonder, the same expression she imagined he wore when he looked at a well-executed plan in his own line of work. "You think like someone who's used to being underestimated," he said one afternoon, watching her wire the panic room's silent alarm into the library's built-in shelving. "I'm a woman running a construction crew in an industry that still assumes I'm someone's assistant. Yeah, I've had some practice being underestimated." "Their mistake." "Their loss," she corrected, and he huffed something that was almost a laugh. The tension between them thickened in the weeks that followed, not toward anything either of them named, but present in every room they shared. Every glance held a half-second too long. Every moment his hand hovered near her back without quite touching when he guided her past a hazard on a job site. She caught herself watching the way he rolled his shirt sleeves back when he helped move furniture he had no business moving himself. The concentration on his face when he studied blueprints she spread across the dining room table. He caught her watching. Neither of them acknowledged it. The confrontation came on a night in late June, when Carmine Russo's men breached the gate under cover of a supply delivery Marissa herself had scheduled weeks earlier. The schedule leaked from somewhere inside Vincent's own operation. She was in the East Wing, finishing wiring in the room that had once belonged to Angela, when she heard the first shout from the grounds outside. She did not freeze. She had learned enough about this world by now to know that freezing killed people. She grabbed the two-way radio Vincent had insisted she carry after the black car incidents, and moved to the window, watching 3 men cross the lawn toward the side entrance, the one entrance she had personally redesigned with a reinforced door and a delay lock disguised as decorative ironwork. "Vincent, they're coming through the east side," she said into the radio, voice low and steady. "The door will hold for 90 seconds. Use it. Get to the panic room in the library, now. I'm not hiding while your house gets shot up. I built the delay lock. I know exactly where the choke point is." She heard him swear, low and fast, in a way that told her he was already moving. She positioned herself in the hallway shadow exactly where the newly built support beam created a blind corner, watched the first man come through the delayed door exactly as predicted, disoriented by the extra seconds the lock had bought, and she swung the heavy construction flashlight she still carried out of habit directly into his gun hand, hard enough to send the weapon skidding across the hardwood she herself had refinished 3 weeks earlier. The second man came through faster, and she stepped back into the shadow of the support beam, heart hammering but hands steady, and shouted a warning down the hallway that gave Vincent the half-second he needed as he came around the corner from the study. Vincent arrived seconds later, moving through the remaining 2 men with the terrible fluid economy of someone who had done this before. Every motion precise, nothing wasted, and within a minute, the hallway had gone silent except for breathing. Outside, the sound of running feet retreating across gravel told her the rest of Russo's men had lost their nerve once the element of surprise had failed. "You could have died," he said afterward, gripping her shoulders, checking her over with hands that were not entirely steady, despite everything she had just watched him do without hesitation. "You could have died in my house." "Our plan worked," she said. "The delay lock worked." "That is not the point, Marissa." "It is exactly the point. I'm not a woman who hides in a panic room while other people fight for the thing I built. I'm the woman who builds the thing that wins the fight." He looked at her like he was seeing something he had been afraid to look at directly for months, and when he finally spoke, his voice had lost all its careful control. "I have loved exactly 2 people in my life, and I buried one of them because I trusted the wrong man to protect her. I am not going to lose you to the same mistake." "Then don't protect me from a distance," she said. "Let me stand next to you. That's the only kind of protection I trust." They stood in the hallway for a long moment afterward, the adrenaline slowly draining out of both of them, and neither moved away from the other, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him, close enough that the space between them had stopped meaning anything like distance. "Say it," she said quietly. "Whatever it is you're not saying." "I don't have the words for it. I have never needed them before." "Try anyway." "I think you already know." "I think I want to hear you say it." He exhaled, something in his shoulders finally loosening after weeks of carrying tension she had watched build without understanding its full weight until tonight. "I did not expect you. I did not want to expect you. And I am done pretending I don't." Carmine Russo was dealt with within the week, not through more violence but through evidence Marissa had unknowingly gathered while documenting the property's utility records. Records that traced supply deliveries and access schedules directly back to a mole inside Vincent's own crew, the same mole who had leaked her scheduling information. Vincent presented the evidence to the commission personally, calm and absolute, and Carmine's ambitions collapsed under the weight of his own miscalculation before a single additional shot was fired. The mole, a soldier named Frankie who had been with the family for 11 years, disappeared from Vincent's organization entirely, and Marissa did not ask what that meant, understanding instinctively that some questions were better left unasked if she wanted to keep sleeping at night. The house was finished at the end of summer, 4 months exactly, as promised. Marissa stood in the foyer on the final walkthrough, the chandelier now fully restored and blazing warm light across floors that no longer held any water stains, any collapsed ceilings, any ghosts pretending to be furniture. "It doesn't feel like a monument anymore," Vincent said, standing beside her, close enough that his shoulder nearly touched hers. "It feels like a house someone could actually live in." "That was the assignment." "You did more than the assignment." He turned to face her fully. "Angela's room. I walked past it yesterday without needing to close my eyes. I hoped that would happen eventually. I don't know how to be soft, Marissa. I have spent 15 years building a version of myself that cannot afford softness. But you walked through every room in this house that I was afraid of, and you did not flinch once. Not from the house. Not from me. I told you, I don't flinch. It's a professional liability I've never bothered to fix." He reached out and touched her jaw, careful, like she was something he had decided he was allowed to want, without immediately calculating the cost of wanting it. "Stay. Not as my contractor. The job is finished. Stay because I am asking you to stay." Marissa thought about the ordinary life she could have chosen, the safe contracts, the clients who paid on time, and never had black cars idling outside gates. She thought about the 4 months of watching a man rebuild himself in the same rooms she was rebuilding, brick by brick, room by room, and she understood that some renovations were never really about the house at all. "I'll stay," she said, "but I'm not moving into a finished house and doing nothing. There's a guest wing that still needs work." This time his smile reached his eyes, fully, for the first time since she had met him, and the sound of his laugh filled the foyer like it belonged there, like it had been waiting years for permission. "There will always be a guest wing that needs work," he said. "If that's what it takes to keep you here, I'll start knocking down walls myself." "Don't you dare. I saw how you handled that drywall last month." "I handled it fine." "You handled it like a man who thinks demolition is the same as construction." He laughed again, and this time he did not stop himself, and the sound filled the restored foyer, bouncing off walls that had spent 6 years hearing nothing but silence and dust settling. They stood together in the light of the restored chandelier, in a house that had once been a wound and was now simply a home, and neither of them said anything else, because some truths did not need to be spoken twice. Outside, the late summer evening settled gold and warm over the grounds, over gates that no longer felt like a threat, over a house that had finally, after 6 long years, remembered what it felt like to hold something worth protecting. If this story pulled you in, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more dark romance stories just like this one. Drop a comment telling us which moment hit you hardest, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.